Webcam microphone up close. Webcam microphone up close. Let's see.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was a...
But I have the files. You know, I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? The brain, you know, pistols and the fondle slap of choice, and computers doesn't really matter. Internet, professional wrestlers, and not Jesse Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the information comes from as long as it's real. It doesn't. It's hard to get real information because seriously, they don't want you to just read two sources whenever I try to prove out. You know, it's not. If you expect your government to tell you the truth, you're going to sadly disappoint another one of these things.
Dear Lord, what a dirty, dirty old man, huh?
Really? Can't be serious. Is this really how you want things to be? Come on. More hooker, eruptions? Eruptions, whatever.
Like Dave Powers kind of...
Really?
Allegedly broadcast live from Pima Region 2-3 within the borders of the formerly united and currently occupied states of America. We bring you the Ochelli Effect.
I damn sure know I'm an original. We have all these situations. I'd love to know why it takes 50 years, for
that's that.
For a 19-year-old girl to eventually get up to gumption to put these things out.
And that is that. It is live on UCY.TV radio. This is the Ochelli Effect. I am Chuck Ochelli, of course, your host. Anyway, hopefully you guys can hear me all right because I'm on kind of an odd setup, but hey, that's the way things go when puppies want to chew on your headphones and things. Oh, boy. Anyway, tonight, no clips, no particular guest, because actually I've got somebody that's going to start working with me on some of these broadcasts, as I tried to explain on a couple of my other shows, and we will add her in very, very shortly as soon as I can get myself together to get her. And that's Michelle Michuli, and we will be... See, this is always the trouble, especially when I can't see what I'm doing. Let's see if I can get her on. But anyway, back to what I was saying. It is, of course, Thursday, and the 12th. It is the 12th, isn't it, of June? Yes, it is, the 12th of June. So, Michelle, are you with me? Okay, perhaps not yet. Anyhow, what I envisioned when I started doing this is that eventually I would have more people that would assist me with things, that I would have kind of like a small team of people to make more sense out of things than I can all by myself, because look, no matter who you are, your own viewpoint is one thing, and you have your own prejudices, let's just say, toward a lot of topics, and I like to try and keep my mind open, so I do need people to keep me in check, and I was kind of hoping that people would join me in that effort. But one of those people, though, is Michelle. I think I got you now. Michelle?
Yeah, you got me. I'm here.
Okay. I wasn't sure there because I saw you come up and I wasn't sure if I had you. So like I was explaining, when I first envisioned doing this show, and when I first envisioned the idea of doing a website and everything else, which there is an unpublished Ochelli Effect website still, but I'm working on that. I really did want to have people that were going to keep me in check, that were going to be sort of like-minded, but different enough from myself so that it wouldn't always be just my sort of harsh view of things. However, it has been an educational experience to watch people come and go, listeners and participants on the show and everything else. I've had an interesting array of guests so far, which I'm hoping to make even more interesting over the next couple of months. But tonight, we're doing this for the first time where Michelle's going to stick with me, and actually, this is not me interviewing her. This is her and I working together on this, and we'll see how this goes. So, You
Give me
all
one
set?
second. I'm having a little bit of technological difficulties.
Oh, listen, you got all the time you need because I've been having them all week. All week. And there I hear myself kicking back. But, yeah, I mean, it's an adventure, that's for sure. And as simple as it seems to do these shows, sometimes I got to tell you guys, it's not. There's always little things that get in the way. Even when I try and do, simple interviews with guests and everything else, I've only pre-recorded one of my interviews so far, and that was because of a time consideration. That was Dr. Titovitz, who was Lee Harvey Oswald's best friend, and since he's out there in that particular part of the Russian Federation at this point, it was just a matter of time concerns for him. So, generally speaking, though, I do this as raw as possible, live, and uncensored. So, how you doing, Michelle? You got that together? Maybe not. It's okay. We got still another 1 hour and 55 minutes to go, so it doesn't matter. We can get it together later.
We're good. I think I'm good to go now.
Oh, cool. All right. So here's the thing. This week, you posted something on Facebook, and Michelle's Facebook presence is pretty interesting. I only see a few people that get around really, really quickly, like you do through that Facebook maze. I really don't even like the Facebook thing, but it's just one of those tools that I'm trying to use, even though I know it's part of the machine that I really shouldn't be playing with. It is useful, though, to make connections with people, so I still utilize it. But you get around quite a bit and have a lot to say, but I'll tell you, now...
I'm just laughing at your verbiage there, I'm sorry.
My verbiage is always loaded with weird stuff. Just like you heard Kim say during a private conversation, she said, your mind is like a whorehouse of what was it? A whorehouse of useless and useful knowledge all together. So, what am I supposed to do?
No. She called it never mind. I don't.
Was it worse than that?
She called it a gangbang. Pardon the French, guys, but yeah. And it was the greatest phrase ever. Kim needs to trademark that because it's so true.
It is funny because, you push me in the right direction. The next thing you know, you've been listening to me yap for an hour. So what can I do? I guess that's why I wanted to be on a radio show. So anyway, you made this post on Facebook, which, we're treating things really, really lightly here. But I think it's a serious issue because here's the thing. I'm always talking about the level of empathy that people have for one another and how this is very much lost and how we're losing our humanity. And there's my trip over my tongue again. So that's one. Let's keep score at home. Okay. But the deal is that, I think it sounds like a lot of empty rhetoric sometimes coming from me, and I don't really point to a lot of examples. I mean, I point to things in the news, and I make statements based on what I understand. Like, for instance, this whole, recent shooting at the school outside of Portland, Oregon. To me, I was struck by something different, and I said this on Jack Blood's show. I said this on my own show. I said this on the Truth Emerges Network, and it's because it is my opinion based on my experiences, and that is that we have a very small sort of non-mass scale, widespread shooting deal where one person goes in and shoots another person and kills them and then apparently kills themselves or whatever else. But these types of events where students had shot each other, stabbed each other, assaulted each other in one way or another, really have been commonplace for a very long time. And I think it's more the mainstream and even the alternatives, media's response to it that has caused it to echo in a different way in the society. They were very much ignoring these things in the inner cities, in the sort of like, if it's not in my backyard, if it's not in front of me, I don't see it kind of way for a very long time. And I feel that needs to be addressed as well. Now, on the other hand, we are seeing an uptick sort of in this wave of continuous violence, in this wave of, illegitimate sort of lack of recognition for your fellow human being, for taking into account that you can cause pain, that you can cause death, and that these things are consequential, that these things are of serious consequence. And yes, it is partially the societal sort of blame as far as the culture goes with the video games and blah, 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 blah. And I hate to say that because I've always been a personal responsibility kind of person. But, you know, the reality here is that children are not fully developed and they require guidance. And I think that that guidance has been lost to the children by their parents first, before they even get exposed to the culture, before they even get out there in the world and can become jaded and hardened. So back to my original point, because I always digress, Michelle posted something on Facebook, and I wonder if you wanted to talk about that, and we could jump off from there.
Okay, sounds good. So, for those of you that aren't my Facebook friend, first of all, what is wrong with you? I am the greatest person on Facebook, and you need to become my friend now. But beyond that, and for the record, if you do want to add me, and you get to see really cute pictures of my kid, and you get to see me complain about stuff, it's Michelle Masciulli, Masciulli, and I suggest you add me. You definitely should. But going from there, for those of you that have listened, you've heard me talk about Vincent before. And Vincent's my 6-year-old son that has environmentally caused autism. Now, he is verbal, but his speech is very limited. So, but he does speak, and he's very active. He loves to interact with other children. So it's really a misnomer when people say that autistic individuals want to keep to themselves, because he seeks the acceptance and love of his peers. So let me fast forward. So we got my son. He loves other kids. He loves to play. He tries to communicate with them, and he does really well. He's mainstreamed in his public school, meaning that he is in a typical classroom, and he has a paraprofessional aide. So all this being said, he doesn't know that he's different sometimes. He never knows that he's different. He doesn't realize that there's a difference between him and other children. He has no clue. And usually kids are very supportive of it, and the kids in his classroom have been awesome with him. He legitimately has friends. It's not the pity party we had when we were in school. I remember for all of us, we kind of there was a stigma attached to special education, and it's not that way in any of the schools I go to, honestly. But so there you go. You have some background on him. He loves other kids. He doesn't realize that there's any difference between him and everyone else. So he wants to play with everyone. So here we are. We go to the pool in our subdivision. And it's hot as hell. It's Texas. It's 100 degrees out. We're pretty desperate. So we head over there, and usually everyone's pretty nice. We live in a nice area, and everyone here goes to his school, so a lot of the kids know him. And even, they're typically functioning and whatnot. So we go, and he's in the pool playing by himself, and there's some boys his age, maybe a little older, playing in there. And he goes over there, and he kind of tries to play with them. He makes eye contact with them, and he'll grab a toy and kind of, shoot him with it, or, whatever, just try to interact with them non-verbally. And these kids kind of look at him, and then the parent comes in and pushes him away, just kind of barricades him, and I'm just appalled by this. And at first I was like, well, maybe they worry that he's going to hurt him. They do it again, and I'm just like, I'm appalled. I don't even have the words for it. I can't believe these people are shunning my son, who is a gentle giant, and pushing my kid away from their kids. So not only are the parents kind of shunning him, now the other kids are like, okay, we don't want to talk to him. So there's my kid, and he doesn't understand that these people don't want to play with him, and they don't know why they don't want to play with him. So he still tries to go over and play with them. He's like, why, what's going on? So he goes over there, and then they just totally give him the cold shoulder and blow him off. And the parent still is acting like this barricade, and eventually I'm pissed. And this is me putting it very nicely. You guys know this is the Italian hour with us too. So if you don't know, we have tempers. We have huge tempers. And I'm 5'1", but there's a lot of temper in this little body. So I go over there, and I'm very nice about it. And I said, look, I don't know if you know this or not, but your kids won't catch my son's autism. However, they will catch your ignorance. And I walk away. And the parent was just mouth to the floor. They couldn't believe that I called them out. So here's the thing. I think this is where we're going with this tonight, is where is this complete lack of empathy coming from? It's certainly not, they're not born with it. What is causing this? Is it the children? Is it the parents? I mean, there's so many avenues it could be coming from.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a combination of things, and this is why it stuck with me, though, is because, you know, like you said, things have changed a bit, and you know, we're very often in a position on shows like this of talking about exactly how badly things are going culturally in the society and everything else. But you know, the truth about what they used to call handicaps, regardless of what they were, whether it was you know, something that was considered more of a psychological problem, a behavioral problem, a neurological problem, physical problems of all sorts, there is still kind of a weird divide, and even though you know, political correctness is not something that I embrace personally, but at the same time, there has been some good, there has been some movement progressively in this way, that it is not, you know, simply accepted in most institutional environments to preclude people who have any sort of I struggle for the word here, because it's not a matter of disability in some cases. It's a matter of a different ability, but I do hate the term differently abled. You know, and I don't like calling anyone disabled, because, you know, just think about the word disabled. You know, they are not able. They are not able for what? You know, simply because someone cannot walk does not mean they're not brilliant. Simply because someone cannot talk does not mean they're not strong as hell. You know, I mean, you may have different abilities, you may be in a different sort of way of dealing with the world, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're any less of a human being. And at least that has sort of gotten across, I would say, in recent decades, but only in an institutional setting. When people are left to their own devices, okay, when they are sort of left to govern their own situations, you know, even in as much as some parents don't govern their own children at all, it seems. I've seen that. I saw that today. You know, two kids that were left in a waiting room that were acting in such a way that, I'll tell you, if I had ever done anything like that, I probably would have gotten knocked unconscious. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, everywhere you go, you see this sort of lack of an ability to rein in their children. Either, and I realize that, again, the bad part of the culture has come about where we're dealing with, you know, extremely overzealous CPS workers in various states, law enforcement getting themselves involved in family situations where they don't belong, and things like this do happen. But at the same time, I'm still seeing this sort of decline among people trying to teach a decent sort of morality and a generally accepted morality. This is not about a particular set of morals, but about how if you're in a public setting where people are meant to interact, you know, there is no reason to discriminate against them in any way, shape, or form. And this is one of the things that is still not being taught correctly by a great number of the population, and this like really aggravated me when you were telling this story in very short form on Facebook. You know, for my own personal reasons, but also going right back to the fact that you know, it's hard enough to get adults to be civil, it seems, but children are even worse when they're not being taught. And, you know, if left to their own devices, you know, I mean, the Lord of the Flies example does still stand, you know.
I definitely agree. I'm going to touch on something you actually just brought up, and I'm bringing it up again because the guys are talking about it in the chat room. We were talking about, you know, naming and how we would describe people that are differently abled or disabled or whatever you'd like to use. I as I mentioned in almost every show, I have a nonprofit that I work during the day that works for the rights of disabled individuals. Specifically, I work in special education, and our website is abilityrights.org. Not disability rights, it's abilityrights.org, because we want people to focus on the abilities. I mean, but I'm going to be frank, as a mother of a child that's pretty seriously disabled, it's hard. It's really hard to look at that, to look at the bright side and say, no, you're not disabled. Let's look at the good things. And but we try. So on that note, a lot of people in the community like to use neurotypical, which would replace what people call normal. Instead of saying a normal kid, that we use neurotypical for someone that it was retarded, because that's still a word that we get thrown around a lot. The probably one of the very, very few things that Obama has ever done that's been worth a damn is change the name of that disability. So it's called intellectually disabled now. Mental retardation is no longer a disability, because everybody liked to manipulate that word and screw it up. So thanks for stealing retarded from us, guys. But it's now,
I'm pretty angry about that myself, because
you know what? It's intellectually disabled now.
Yeah, but I don't want to look at the guy who does something completely stupid in front of my house and say that he's intellectually disabled. I don't want to do that. That guy is still retarded, and I don't care. I got to tell you, because retarded to me is more like someone who is acting completely like they don't have a mind of their own, like they don't have the ability to think. Retardation to me was never any of those guys who had those problems. Someone who was, oh boy, I'm trying to think of what the term was, but
we could just say intellectually disabled that have intellectual disabilities. The thing is that term was. That's where the term came from. Retarded also means stunted, but mental retardation is the only place where that came from. Mm-hmm. So society has taken the term retarded or retard from that diagnosis. So because people with mental retardation or intellectual disability have IQs lower than 70, for the fact of the day, for all you guys, that's what is considered retarded or intellectual disability. And they can act less than proper in public, and they can do things that we would call quote-unquote retarded. So that's where that came from. And like I said, everybody kind of hijacked that from the individuals with mental retardation. So there you go, fun fact of the day. Everyone else can be retarded now, but I guess those with IQs less than 70 are intellectually disabled.
Well, that's fine with me. I mean, and look, we've got to give credit where credit is due, and that is one thing that Obama did there. I mean, just like I have to very reluctantly cite the fact that the Americans with Disabilities Act, and then the follow-on to the update to the Americans with Disabilities Act in the 90s, both of these things were done by, God help me, George H.W. Bush, who, wow. We got to see him jump out of a plane today, if anybody was watching their feeds, by the way. On the same day that they were talking about this is what cracked me up too, because I just popped on CNN, and I remember there's also a link back to this for a second, but it killed me, because they're doing this whole back to the 60s, sort of, because CNN is no longer a news channel. They're trying to sort of evolve themselves into being like the old A&E network, where they did these documentaries and these like history docs sort of kind of programming, which is preset, as opposed to, covering MH370 for, 6 months or whatever it is. So, they're talking about that, and of course, you guys knew I was going to bring this one up, because they're covering the Kennedy assassination tonight, so I'm very sure I'm going to force myself to sit down and keep a bucket by me so I don't have to throw up too often on the floor, because, and here's why. It's not just because every time the Kennedy assassination comes up in the public that I bring this up, and I know I'm changing the subject here a little bit, but just I feel like this needs to be brought up when someone brings up the term retarded. Excuse me again, but
no, well, the guys are right. It's a word, and if anything, all I want to do is educate people on what it means and what it is now. And don't worry, I'm not gonna bite your head off. But again, You know, that's what I'm all about. I think that's what we're both all about is education. So, go ahead.
Absolutely.
I want to hear your Kennedy. I want to hear the Kennedy link to retarded. This is going to be good.
Well, that's real easy, actually. If you look at some of the legislation, some of the very first rights that were ever legislated upon by the U.S. government regarding this were actually things that were championed by Senator and also Congressman Kennedy in the 50s. But but that was because, of course, he had his own problems with his one sister who had passed away, which everybody knows the story about her getting a lobotomy and all of that. That was one of the most interesting sort of dark chapters, say, in the Kennedy family history. But going on to this thing that I was talking about there, real quick, the reason why I got aggravated at this is because if you guys do a little bit of a search, you'll find that there were op-ed pieces that were published with my name under them, very much fighting against, and here we go again with another one of these sort of links to the... Because I used the term that Forrest Gump was going to explain to us all about the Kennedy assassination, and the reason why in my op-ed pieces I said this is because Tom Hanks and Playtone bought the rights to a Vincent Bugliosi book, which is a 1,600-page disaster of solipsistic history that no one should have to endure reading. And the funny thing is that most of the critics of the book have never actually read the entire thing. I tortured myself with the entire 1,600 pages, including 1,000 pages of a CD-ROM.
Oh my God!
And I did it, and I'm telling you, man, it is just months of my life I will never have back. But again, but it's Tom Hanks's Playtone company, which we, myself and other people who did research on the Kennedy assassination, were posting op-eds. We were bombarding Tom Hanks, Gary Getzman, and other executives at Playtone, as well as seriously punishing the people at HBO Films, because they were going to do a 12-part miniseries all about how Oswald killed Kennedy, and we really went after them. So it has now reemerged because Playtone is doing this whole 60s thing, which now they have crunched the Kennedy assassination into a 1 or 2 hour doc piece, which is a whole lot less damaging than the 12-part Bugliosi debacle that was going to happen on HBO. But of course, the Parkland movie, which again was another soul assassin kind of fairy tale, was inflicted on the American public, completely flopped as well last year, and I was very glad to see that. But this stuff is still popping up. So, but back to where we were going. I wanted to get that out of my head because it was something that I had on my mind before I went to air, and it was just a personal aggravation. And here's why: I literally fought against this stuff, bombarded him at the same time that we were also attacking Leonardo DiCaprio, who was going to do something else, and we actually put a stop to that as well. All about how the mob killed Kennedy, of course, one of these kind of deals. But, the truth and the things that we work at and the things that we take personally, there's a reason for it. Your son, Vincent, he is part of the reason why you care about this stuff, but I have a sneaking suspicion that even if that was not the case, that you actually have some empathy yourself for your fellow human being, even previous to his birth.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. I'm a very empathetic person. More so, I mean, when I see someone that needs help, I have bleeding heart syndrome. Oh my goodness, I am definitely Mother Teresa to a fault, and I'm working on that. I'm working on being a little tougher, but yeah, I am empathetic. And you know what's funny though is that it wasn't that I was taught that, and I know this is kind of where we're going with this. Is it wasn't nature or nurture? Well, maybe it was nature. I don't know, because I wouldn't. When I see children that are really crappy, like these kids, and that's probably the nice word that I have, they obviously learned it from their parents. But me being I think I'm a pretty good person. Being a good person, is that my nature? Is it in our nature to be good, or is it in our nature to be a blank canvas? And a lot of times I have to remind myself that myself or anyone isn't necessarily the rule, but sometimes we're the exception. So here we go. So how are we? Do you think that we are born as a blank canvas, or do you think people are born inherently good?
See, that's a very tough question. That's one of those things that that scientists have obviously wrestled with for a very long time. I think that it is extremely narrow-minded for anybody to believe that, like, let's just say your genetics alone dictate your behavior and things like that. Scientifically, it's narrow-minded. It really is, because the human creature requiring social interaction. This is one of our requirements as well. Our very nervous systems require that interaction. The examples that I've seen other people use, which I think are most instructive, are that, if you take a newborn baby and you keep them in a dark room for the first couple of years of their lives, when they emerge, they will have no eyesight. Some things need to be nurtured by stimulus, which are not necessarily the standard idea of nurture. So, regardless of their genetic package, though, they could be blinded. Newborn babies that are not held in hospitals, they die. They just die. This is something that they discovered a while ago. But even babies that are in incubators require some sort of physical stimulation because we're social creatures. And when I had Maria Heller on the show, she made a very good point to me that even senior citizens later on in life, their lives are often cut short when they have no interaction with other human beings. So our connection as individuals to others is just as important as our ability to gain moisture from water and to gain nourishment from food. This is one thing. The other thing is, look, I'm going to be really bluntly honest about something, and here's the thing. If empathy was only a matter of nurture, then I would have none. Personally, myself, I have had the privilege to have people tell me that serial killers are just about raised the way that I am generally, that I was, when I was younger. So it is not a matter of only what comes in from the outside world, regardless of how hostile it is. It is also not a matter of nature, because one's nature alone does not necessarily counter all of the input that you do receive from the outside. It seems to be that the only logical answer is that it requires both. But here's the thing, again. There are plenty of cases where someone is raised in a perfectly normal sort of or typical, happy, healthy kind of home, and they wind up being extremely bad people. Regardless of what you do, sometimes a bad seed is a bad seed. But I have a problem with just saying that as well, because it's one of those things that I bat back and forth. And you know what? If anybody else wants to come on and talk about this, I'll tell you what. Phone lines are open, 718-717-8296. If you guys want to come on and just give your opinion or tell me that I'm out of my mind or whatever else, please do. But it's one of those things, honestly, that I think is worthy of debate and worthy of exploration, because I think that's one of those questions that we can't really answer at the moment. I mean, I don't know what your opinion is, but that's where I stand from my own personal point of view. Like I said, generally, if you were to line me up with your average sort of hardened, extremely sociopathic criminal, I had a similar upbringing to that. So why am I not like that, but yet others, for very, very lesser reasons, wind up turning to that sort of behavior in their lifetimes? I don't know, is the only answer that I have, honestly. But it seems as though there's a valid point to the nature versus nurture kind of discussion. But I think it's always worthy to remember that you have to keep in mind the epigenetic reaction, because although there may be certain things within the genetics that are triggers or that can be triggered without the proper stimulus to them, I think that they never are. So, and vice versa, if you provide the negative stimulus to a genetic package that doesn't have the right switches in it, let's just say, you don't create the negative effect also. That's just what it seems to me like, and I know that's a really simplified sort of synopsis about it, but that's just how I see it. But what do you think exactly?
Well, It would go with our ping pong ball back and forth. I think you and I, we think very similarly. See, there we go. I got the Chuck syndrome. We think very much alike about a lot of things. And
score 2, by the way, if you're scoring at home.
Can't you get that? I am inclined to agree with you. I think that we are probably genetically predisposed to maybe be a certain way, but then again, like you, I should probably be a sociopath, and I should be, a crack whore on the street corner, with no teeth. No offense to any of our listeners that are crack whores with no teeth, but I mean,
wait a minute. I have no problem offending the crack whores with no teeth who are listening to us. Just so you know, if you are listening to us, good for you, but you may take offense now. I disagree with Michelle on that. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, prostitution is the earliest profession, so, but, I digress.
No, you know what, though? That's an interesting topic right in and of itself.
I would love to talk about that someday, especially because I am, I'm a quote-unquote liberated woman, maybe, of the younger generation, so I'm a little bit more open about what a woman chooses to do and whatnot, but we'll talk about that another time.
I was about ready to fall over because you said I am, and you hesitated, and I was going to say, wait a minute.
Well, my gated subdivision isn't cheap, Chuck, so,
Wow. Talk about admissions on the air. Okay. Anyway, sorry.
On that note. I should probably be down that road, but I didn't, and I mean, that would be nature and nurture then, because genetically, I should not be in the best scenario, and nurture, I definitely shouldn't be. But, see, I really don't know. And
you're doing the same thing I am, which is...
I'm really bad about that.
You go back and forth here, because, look, there's plenty of science to back up the idea that many sort of behavioral traits are passed along. Okay. I have a daughter that's going to turn 15 on Saturday, right? She is, in a lot of ways, her mannerisms, her way of speaking, the way she behaves are very much like me, despite the fact that she's developed them being at a distance from me, because for a very long time I wasn't able to visit with her and really interact with her very much at all. But yet she holds her hands in a similar way, walks and talks in a similar way with a little bit of a different accent, because I was sitting in a northern state while she was down here in North Carolina for years. But even so, you can see the similarities. We make the same facial expressions and everything else. But at the same time, she's had a completely different package of stimulus given to her as well. So I think both things are extremely valid. And, it's one of those things that I think is just really worthy of debate. And like I said, the epigenetic reaction is just one of the key components that I think is being missed. It is extremely ignorant to believe, I think, that either one is the absolute end of things, and here's why. There was plenty of people that believed in, the eugenics sort of deal where, if someone had a low IQ, they should be sterilized. And if you don't believe me, that happened not in Nazi Germany first.
No.
Here in the United States. There was... you can look up Huxley and everything else and find out their connections and the Carnegies and all that fun stuff if you want. Believe me, you could take a few weeks at the very least taking a tour of the American Eugenics Society, if you like. But the opinion that, you're simply going to be no different than your parents and all of that, automatically there is really nothing you can do about it. If your parents were criminals, you're going to be criminals. If your parents were good people, you're going to be good people. It is foolish, first of all. But secondly, you can't also, on the other hand, let's just say, you can't also say that only because of a person's environment this is how they develop as well, that genetics have nothing to do with it. I think that they're all factors in development, that's for sure. But to know where the real truth about how someone turns out is a very difficult thing to sort of put your hands around. However, I still say that this does not mean that we should not strive for, encourage in our fellow people, encourage in our children the ideals which are a whole lot more conducive to a civil society. Like I said, not being prejudiced, and by prejudice I do mean prejudging individuals based on certain characteristics, whether they be their appearance, their abilities, their financial status, their parents, anything else. In other words, right back to Dr. King again, judge people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. And let's add, not their level of ability per se, not their religious affiliation, not even their political affiliation. Good people are good people, and they should be treated as such. End of story. And that's the way I feel about it. That's the kind of thing I try to impress on my kids, and I'm going to even more in-depthly, that's funny, in a more in-depth way. That's 3. Now, see, Michelle's going to make me go over 3 tonight. I know it. But that's all right.
I have to interrupt you real quick.
Sure.
Because we have started a trend, and as you know, I kind of keep an eye on the chat room, and I poke my nose in there. And, the hookers are pretty popular in the chat room, and I've had a few messages as well. So let me just go ahead and lay it out for you guys. I am not a prostitute. I have never been a prostitute, nor will I be a prostitute. However, we are looking for new ways to fund the show, so if anyone would be interested in working for us, let us know. Sorry.
Oh my God, that's hysterical.
You should see the guys there. Now we're talking about German and Russian hookers. Look what you did. Look what you did. It's all your fault.
Well, listen, prostitution is a very worthy subject, okay? And, look, I've got my opinions on it. If you guys want to discuss that, by all means, look, call up 718-717-8296, and we can discuss prostitution for the next hour if you like.
Oh,
that's
that would
not a problem.
Well, honestly, if we really want to go down that road, I think that we're in such an interesting. Hold on one second. Shh. Of course, I would talk about prostitution when my son decides to visit.
That's okay, because you know what?
Okay. Someone asked if they offered me $1 million. $1 million. Or for how much it is for the first 5 minutes on my 900 number. Well, talk is cheap, so, Hold on one second.
Well, yeah, talk can be cheap, that's for sure, but not necessarily here. Look, wow. I could say a lot about this, and I'm glad she's keeping track of the chat room because I can't. I've tried many times, guys, and I'm so sorry, but hey, what can you do? Prostitution is an interesting subject, I gotta say, because after all, I have gone back and forth on it in my political evolution, let's just say, in my social evolution, in my moral evolution about things. But look, comparatively speaking, it's no more of a dishonest trade than a lot of other things that people make plenty of money on. So, so no matter how you want to morally judge it, I mean, look, there are plenty of people that are in the media that I call prostitutes, which is something that I borrow from Gerald Celente, but that's okay. I love the term because that's what they are. They're, they're out there pushing viewpoints for hire, and they're being funded. I mean, look, along those lines, that whole sort of defeat of the candidate there in Virginia recently, everybody thinks that's some sort of stunning upset that, that the people's voice was heard, and then actually, are you guys out of your minds? Do you realize, or do you not realize, that the Koch brothers virtually funded that candidate. And, I'm not the only one who's saying so, and I really do hate to side with a guy like Tom Hartman, who was on RT explaining it and laying it out, and I was shocked to see anybody on American television of any kind, and I do know that RT is Russia Today and all that, but this was RT America. On his show, he was laying out exactly how a lot of the funding has worked for talk radio and for particular hosts, including Hannity Ingram, and there was another guy whose name I always forget, but believe me, he's another guy who's very, very popular in the sort of right-wing Rushbo sort of, he always says he has half his brain tied behind his back. I think that's because half his brain is still, screwed up on the Oxycontin, but this is my opinion after all. All of that's Mark Levin. That was the name I was looking for. These guys are directly funded by the Koch brothers, who pounded the hell out of that candidate. Not in favor of the guy who won, but also pounding the hell out of the House Majority Leader. So, when you look at that, and then you look at all of the other sort of propaganda that's being funded by these guys, I mean, it's more of the same, people. This is just another case where the big money, the dark money, as a matter of fact, if you want to Google that little phrase, dark money in politics, you find out how there's an undercurrent of this stuff, and this is how people still with the largest money, and as of 1976, when money was found to be speech in the Supreme Court, and then of course based on the Citizens United and all that stuff, and the change in the structures for the PACs and all this other thing, of course this is where the influence lies, is with the money, with the large corporations. And if you think an upset like that was pulled off by the people on the ground, you're out of your minds, because first of all, if they couldn't steal the votes, they bought them one way or another, whether it's with a deluge of media or it's with, directly buying them one way or another. Believe me, this stuff is all bought and paid for and is all part of the larger strategy. You can also look at the ties to that candidate and the Koch brothers and the BB&T Bank, I think it is, just off the top of my head. But, again,
I think, you hit the nail on the head that everything has a price. And I mean, that goes on the most deepest of levels as well. I mean, we as a people have a price. I mean, our politicians are selling us out to so many people, and not just the media, but I mean, of course, like you said, the media is controlled by corporations. We've been sold out to biotech, to big pharma, to everyone, and we are guinea pigs, and we're slaves. We're slaves that have been sold. Forget prostitution. That's really what we are.
Well, right. Considering the organized slavery by the Federal Reserve, considering the international banking structure the way it is, considering
that is terrible.
Considering the way that I'll tell you another fascinating little thing that I encountered too, because I got some complaints for a little bit about how I wasn't even bothering to talk about what was going on in the Ukraine and all this kind of stuff. And you know why I abandoned it? Because when I started to realize that the Ukraine was supposed to be under siege by Putin and his people are turning around and making demands about gas prices, and having them turned back, and actually the Russians giving in to them based on their demands, you know what? It looks to me again like we're looking at a staged sort of event to evoke certain sympathies, and again, the corporate interests on a different level, because obviously Putin doesn't play by the same type of rules that Barry, I'm just going to call him Barry at this point, plays, because it's a slightly different set of puppet strings is what it is. So yeah, I abandoned that as something that I think is worthy of talking about. And if you don't believe me, check it out. There's demands that they made about the price of, I think it's 10,000 cubic feet of natural gas to the Russian companies, and you can go ahead and go down that rabbit trail all you want. But you'll find that there's a whole lot of business interests involved here, as opposed to the simple demands of ethnic Russians and things like that. So that's why I didn't get into it. But prostitution, on the other hand, seems to be very prevalent anyway. So really, it's more of an honest transaction. If you're exchanging money for somebody's body for a little while, you're only renting it after all, as opposed to buying their entire life and trading it and selling it. It seems to me to be a much more worthwhile kind of thing than what we see on the grand scale. At least that's my opinion.
Yeah, I am inclined to agree, like usual, with you, but like I said, I think I'm in the mindset that if a woman so feels that she wants to do that, then more power to her. Let her do what she wants. And I think that's really what it comes down to. As long as people are safe and consensual, then there you go. And I think the government is just mad because they haven't found a way to tax it yet.
Oh, but they have, though. In some places it is...
Vegas, I know that.
Yeah, and I mean, there is a way to tax it, there is a way to handle it, and believe me, they will eventually figure out a way to tax the amount of saliva in your mouth if you give them a chance. That's a guarantee.
Like I tell people, I love Texas because I have a lot of freedoms here. I'm free in every way except for my uterus.
Oh.
You're free in Texas in every regard except if it pertains to you being a woman. So, you pick your battles, but that's a whole other story. While you were talking about natural gas in Russia, it made me think of something that's going on locally here with us. And I think it essentially comes back to the government having us by the balls, so to speak. Not me, because we know I don't have those, but we here in Texas, generally speaking, you can choose your own electricity provider. And in Texas, we have crazy electric bills because we spend so much to cool our homes. Now, a lot of people have started to utilize solar energy, and we also use wind energy. The windmills, those are very popular here as well. And so here in San Antonio, where I've recently moved, I'm new to this part of Texas. They have one provider, and it's actually the city. The city owns this provider, and individuals that utilize solar panels are now being charged more per kilowatt hour than someone if they were just utilizing typical electricity. So what this means, and there's a huge uproar about it, that the individuals that are using the panels have to pay, I think, $2.50 per kilowatt hour, which is insane. If you were to pay that for, to typically use your house, you would spend thousands and thousands and thousands. So their justification, the electric company's justification, is that it costs more to power these things, and it's an absurd justification. And essentially, what they're trying to do is keep us slaves to them, keep us coming back to them and under them. And I'm just appalled, and that's my word of the day. I'm appalled all the time now, apparently. I really need to expand my vocabulary, but I'm pissed that these people are trying to be more self-sufficient, and here's the city government trying to keep them from doing that by charging them 10 times, I think almost 100 times what they charge a person. Let me see. I don't know what my rate is. I pay like 9/10 of a cent or something like that. But they're charging these people $2.50 a kilowatt hour if they have these panels. So here we are, again, remaining slaves.
Well, what happens if you build your own, put your own up?
Well, I think you could get away with it if you were just completely solar powered, but I don't think I don't know a lot. I'm still immersing myself in the community, but I don't think that there's a lot of that at this point. What they're trying to do is stop the people that are doing partial, or maybe, I don't know a lot about solar power. Maybe I should. Maybe it needs to be, it takes electricity to convert the solar power, I think is what it is. And maybe there is a way that they could use solar electricity to power it, but again, here I am, and the city's just kind of grabbing everybody again.
Yeah, I mean, and this is why I really, I'm not able to do this stuff yet. I got to tell you, but if I get my way in the future, I would like to, try and find a way to do the type of stuff like Jimmy's doing, Boiler Room Radio. Jim Funky is, constructing his solar power things, and he's got his sort of off the grid setup, and I really love what he's doing over there.
Oh, and, yeah, he's very interesting, and I've talked to him about his self-sustainability, and he's got the right idea. He has the right idea.
Yeah, the more, and at first, I got to tell you, when I first came around to the network, I was like, well, this is interesting, but it seems as though, what they're going to do in general is make things more cost prohibitive, regardless of, which way you try and go to try and augment, getting yourself away from total dependence on the grid, let's just say, regardless of what the grid is. I mean, there's a new move about changing the way that you're being charged for your internet and all these other things that are going on, and I mean that'll be the end of me as far as being able to do what I do, because
net neutrality, yeah, that's crap.
Yeah, I mean, and I spend a lot of time. I don't know if people realize this, but I mean, trying to get together these interviews and things that I've done with people from various parts of the world. I mean, on my show, you've heard people speak to me from Australia, you've heard people speak to me from Russia, from Canada, from Mexico, from other places. But the thing is, I spend time talking to them first. I don't, just drop an email and then coldly go on the air. I spend a little bit of time discussing with them and trying to create a cohesive sort of presentation when I'm doing those interviews, and believe me, that takes up a bit of space. That uses quite a bit of data, I would say. Trading videos and dropping links and things like this that we all like to do. Sending data back and forth. I mean, it's going to make it, so that only people that have a lot of money are going to be able to do this kind of stuff shortly, if this goes through. I mean, that's my understanding. Perhaps, again, I'm ignorant about what is what here, but it just seems like, the more that we find something that seems to be cheap and accessible for people to utilize as any sort of resource, whether it's for knowledge or for electricity or, for anything else, as soon as it becomes acceptable among the population, they find a way to make it so that it is very difficult to afford. And this was, and I'll tell you, this is kind of a weird sort of thing for me, because the internet in and of itself, when it was, now I know here I am dating myself again, but when there was a discussion about this in the early 90s, and people were using terms like the information superhighway, and all of that, which is really a kind of a cool description if you think about it for what has evolved from that point to now. But when they were talking about it, and they were talking about how easy it would be to utilize a computer and to be able to access knowledge, to be able to speak to people, to be able to interact, in all these different fashions, all of these resources are currently available. And people use it for a lot of nonsense at this point. So in a way, it kind of became what I was afraid of, and I wrote a little article in one of the local papers, because this is the kind of nonsense that I involved myself in when I was a teenager. I would send in little editorials about things, but but it's one of the things I was doing when I wasn't getting myself in trouble, was putting out opinions like, what is going to happen though the day that the majority of the people which do not have the means to participate in this electronic revolution are not able to plug in to the information superhighway. What's going to happen? Well, I was a little bit ignorant there when I said that, because what I didn't realize is they would begin to vet it so that the people that actually have money have the complete access to this stuff, and the rest of us will have our little devices which will limit what we're doing, and then the service providers also coming along and limiting what we're doing causes a different sort of effect, say, among the society as far as the haves and the have-nots go. And I think that people are not paying enough attention to that as well. I know we're all over the map tonight, but I really wanted to try out a bunch of different things for you guys with me and Michelle here, because I do believe that we're going to be able to come up with some very interesting, focused kind of things. But I figured if we go through a sort of potpourri tonight, I can give you guys who do listen to me further downstream, especially, a little better of an idea of who she is. And we also wanted to show the dynamic that we're not just going to sit here and talk JFK and autism, because remember, that was the thing we were talking about off the air. It won't be the autistic JFK hour, but the deal is this. I wanted to make sure that we sort of hit a bunch of different things, and I'm kind of going off the top of my head about it, and I know I ramble on a bit, and I'm sorry, Michelle, because I'm not really giving you a lot of space, but I'm used to doing this way.
No, you're fine, and I think we get along well together, and, well, if everyone doesn't, well, they can kiss my butt, but I think they like us. I think they're putting up with me so far, so we're good. And like you said, we're definitely kind of feeling it out and seeing where we're going to go with this. But I think it's been good, and these are all topics that I've been thinking about and wanting to approach. I definitely want to talk about net neutrality. And there's something else I've been doing recently. I've been reading a really interesting book about the for-profit prison system. And I know this is a completely different tangent than what we've been talking about, but it's true. It's appalling. Again, word of the day: angering, frightening. I can come up with a ton of them, that the influx that we've had in people that are incarcerated, and when it comes down to it, it's for profit. And I just want to be a little bit more well-versed on the subject before we discuss it, but it's definitely something that is plaguing our nation. And this also goes back to something that we were talking about on Tuesday, and that would be marijuana. I mean, look at how many people are in prison now for a plant. And I mean, a healing plant at that. So that being said, I was joking around in the chat room, and I said, you and you're 12 degrees of separation from JFK, and I'm 12 degrees of separation from autism. Everything comes back to it somehow. And in fact, when you were talking earlier, back to our original subject of nature versus nurture, you're talking about if an individual is left without care when they're an infant, they would die. Back in the 60s, they would call it, they would blame the parents for autism. It was called refrigerator moms. That's what they would call them. Refrigerator moms caused autism because they didn't hold their baby enough, or they would ignore them, and they didn't love them enough. And can you imagine how heartbreaking that must have been for a parent? Anyways, there's an example of my 12 degrees of autism there. But, so, back on track.
Well, look, I hear you there, and look, let's not just gloss right over the whole prison industrial complex, because, and I understand I'm not as well versed on it as I would like to be, but every time you turn around, you do see that the influx, the increase, the upswing again of this need for a prison population is not something new. On this network, they often replay Mae Brussel, and I know that some of the people on the network are not big fans of hers, but I like her a hell of a lot more than Bill Cooper, I'll tell you that. And I always respected Mae, and this was one of her main focuses. If you listen to her in the 80s, which I did, these things used to actually come to you on a cassette tape in the mail in the mid and late 80s.
I was born in the 80s.
I know. I was a teenager just starting to explore this world then, But Mae is somebody who I do look to a bit, and I know she's very much stuck on the whole, Nazis are everywhere thing, and I get why. She was sort of fed some disinformation, first of all, but, if you look at the type of stuff that she was doing and you listen very closely, it's very well researched. There we go, that's 4. Researched from open source intelligence, which was, looking at the media, talking to people, actually interviewing people. There were tons of interviews that Mae did where she had nothing but a notepad and a pencil, even going on adventures where she met with people that claimed to be Lee Harvey Oswald in 1983, okay? Stuff like this. And Mae did a lot of really good work. But back to the prison industrial complex deal, this also ties into the medications which are now, have proliferated our society. because let us not forget, and I can tell you firsthand, that the juvenile inmate populations were being drugged with exactly the same type of stuff, the predecessors to the medications which are now everywhere, which they, subscribe at the drop of a hat to just about anyone that has a mood issue or a traumatic event in their life or anything else. These very dangerous and very damaging drugs, have been out there for quite a while. I was personally, when I spent a little bit of time incarcerated as a juvenile, and I've got to tell you that they started with this sort of protocol of drugging us back then. This stuff is not new, people. Okay? The use, however, and the thing that has alarmed me, is that as a teenager, they were still questioning whether they should drug me with stuff like Prozac and Tegretol and stuff like this in order to supposedly control my behavior. But I'm telling you, the psychiatric community cut their teeth regarding these types of medications and behavioral modification with your inmates, with your juvenile inmates and your adult inmates in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. This is nothing new. They tested this. They know how dangerous it is. I can't see how the SSRIs and all of that are so acceptable now, except for the fact that they are backed by the large corporate money, and of course have become extremely acceptable. But I mean, it frightens me at this point because toddlers are being given this stuff, and they're not even remotely finished developing from a neurological standpoint, and they're having these chemicals introduced into their systems. The long-term effects, I defy anyone to actually be able to put a real handle and not find all sorts of contradictory evidence for any of the so-called long-term effect studies on any of these medications. Meanwhile, Big Pharma is pumping out a new one at least, every month. And, there are the standards right now. You have, your Seroquels and all your stuff like that. But, I mean, there's also a bunch of other drugs which they're introducing for conditions that I think in a lot of cases have been renamed and sort of added to the spectrums of other disorders and other problems. In some cases, they were more like personality quirks. I mean, when I was growing up, there was a couple of kids you knew that were kind of hyper. That's what they called us, and in some extreme cases, they would give them stuff like Ritalin. Ritalin is extremely dangerous and damaging, but it is still being prescribed, and very similar pharmaceutically related chemicals are being prescribed to kids with all sorts of supposed disorders, real problems, but also some imaginary and sort of politically motivated and created problems as well. So the prison industrial complex is not just a for-profit situation, but believe me, it's a long-term investment as well, because where do you think they're really doing the guinea pig studies first? Among the people that have already been discarded. You don't have to look very far to see our own government doing this kind of stuff. I mean, we all know about Tuskegee and the South American experiments, and we all have our, opinions as to whether the paperclip, Nazis from Germany were brought in to introduce this idea. But regardless of all that, the psychiatric community is yet another community of, in my opinion, criminal individuals who are doing damage to the whole of society by victimizing individuals chemically and really psychologically on a daily basis. And this is another factor. And if you don't believe me, I'm telling you, you can find plenty of testimonials out there about individuals. Even again, back to the JFK stuff. Abraham Bolden, who tried to sort of blow a whistle on the Secret Service and their lack of an ability to take care of the president because there was a whole other organized attempt to kill him in Chicago. exactly 21 days prior to Dallas. Okay, and he was the first black Secret Service agent to ever be put onto a presidential detail, and all of that kind of good stuff. You can look him up in a book called The Echo from Dealey Plaza. And I'm actually part of a campaign also participating in kind of a peripheral way, demanding that President Obama issue oh my goodness, the word is killing me here, but the point is that Bolden was actually framed up for a crime afterwards when he tried to blow the whistle on the Secret Service, was then incarcerated and drugged for many years in a prison, and was railroaded by the U.S. government for attempting to call out some agents of it. So, but you can take a look at Abraham Bolden online, and you can find that story if you want. But I mean, this kind of stuff has gone on for decades, and if you think it's not important to think about the people that have ended up in prisons, regardless of whether they're there for marijuana or they're there for being whistleblowers or they're any of this or whatever else, they're still human beings, and you better remember that what they end up doing to those people are going to come home to your people if you don't watch it. So this is just something I want to just kind of get out there, and I'm sorry, I know I rambled again, but it's just one of those things that you brought up into my mind when you said that. But, again, I apologize, Michelle.
This is called the Ochelli effect, so you're fine. But, you messed up because you opened Pandora's box. You know how I feel about pharma. And it's really interesting that you said that in your own experience, that you were being incarcerated for a crime, not because of a mental illness or anything of the like, but they thought that you needed to be rehabilitated through medicine. I'm sorry, I caught your speech impairment today, I think. I just can't talk. I think that it's crazy and just ridiculous that people are sitting by and letting this happen. They're not thinking twice about it. And to go a little bit further with prisons for profit, again, I talk a lot about what goes on here in Texas. A lot of, and this ties into a lot of things we talked about today. Everybody loves Wendy Davis. At least women love Wendy Davis. And because she talked about our vaginas, and she stood up for abortion rights and whatnot. And so there's a lot of people here, a lot of the younger women are all about Wendy Davis. I loathe her, number one. She's a Democrat. Number two, she might let me have my choice for what happens in my uterus, but if I choose to have something afterwards, she doesn't support anything. And there's a reason I'm saying this. Just like there are prisons for profit, there are mental hospitals for profit. There are homes. They're homes now. We call them group homes for profit. And what happens is that the state can take away your child from you, your adult child. And I'm learning this because I'm already having to start to go through the steps of planning for my son's future. The state can take away custody of your child. If you say that they are inept and they're not able to, take care of themselves, you can get custody of them as if they're a child. But at any time, if the state decides that you are not caring for your child properly, they can take away your rights. They can do this in a court session without your knowledge, without you present, and then they can put them in a home. And then guess what? These people get your child's state benefits because they get SSI benefits, and of course there are state waivers as well. So they'll get thousands of dollars to these homes, and guess what? They are for profit. And guess what? Everyone's favorite governor candidate is behind it. So that's one of the reasons I don't like her. I don't mean to start talking about politics, and I apologize, but not only is this happening in government. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, don't apologize for that, because this is also another instructive point. This is correct. Every time that the care of people, regardless of whether it is benevolent or malevolent, is introduced into the for-profit system, this is what you get. I knew guys, when I was, when I had graduated high school, let's just say, all right, I lived in a town called Okay, I have no idea why that all crashed there, but I think we're back on the air, and I'm going to add Michelle back in just as soon as I can. Hopefully you guys are hearing me, and I will check with you in just a sec. I don't know what went on there. We started talking about the Affordable Care Act not being affordable. They started talking about the Common Core and all that good stuff, but then all of a sudden we were off the air. So hopefully you guys can hear me again. Let's just see. I think we're back on, Michelle. Okay.
Okay, guys.
Now, do they seem like they can hear us again?
Yeah.
Sound
There we
off
go.
in the chat room. Okay, guys. Sorry about that. You know, we started discussing the problems with. And there we go. I'm getting some more messages now. Probably my wonderful Skype people complaining that I'm off the air. But, yeah, there it is. Okay. Hello, back up. Okay, thank you. Thank you, JJ. Thank you, Vince. And thank you, Mr. Souvenir. Appreciate that, guys, because I did not know it, and it looked perfectly normal to me on this end, so I don't know what happened. But here we are. Okay, so where we left off was explaining that the Common Core thing, it sounds awfully positive, but again, it's another one of these cases of sort of Orwellian doublespeak. I don't know if you guys caught all of that, but there we are. And again, sorry about the little technical issues. Long as we're good now, we'll be able to get right back on into it. I don't know what happened there. Maybe James is sort of a bad luck charm because I had trouble a couple of weeks ago with keeping him on the air with me the one time too. I don't know, but hopefully he'll call back in. Anybody else that wants to call in, the phone should still be open at 718-717-8296, just so you know. But we were discussing, again, the standards and how it is a very large responsibility of the parents. I don't believe that it's the sole responsibility, though, because, after all, they are inundated with a whole lot of other things. And the best that we try to control what it is our children can do and everything else, what it is they're exposed to, is not necessarily... It's not necessarily all under our control at all times, regardless. And... I hear Vincent there, and not just on his behalf or on the behalf of my own children, but I mean just in general, speaking to what it is they're exposed to and everything else. You can't keep them in your house forever, regardless of whether you homeschool them or you send them into the public schools or anything else. They will eventually be inundated with other factors and other influences. So this is something worthy of discussion as well. And but it does begin at home. It does begin at home, and it is kind of disconcerting that I see an obvious neglect on some parents' parts. And James again was saying that he taught his kids manners, he's taught them respect, he's taught them decency. And notice we're not bringing up any sort of religious persuasion or particular technique here. There's just sort of a generally accepted way of kind of dealing with your fellow human being and kind of dealing with the world around you that most of us can agree on. However, it's got nothing to do with this Common Core nonsense. So,
do we still have James on the air, or did he disappear?
We lost James, but I told him to try and call me back in 5. He may be busy. I don't know if he can get back on, but and it was weird too because it was still showing that we were on the air. So I don't know where we went. Thanks to the guys in the chat room and also from my 3 friends who sent me Skype messages there to let me know. I appreciate it.
Well, to go a little bit further on what James is saying, I agree again. I don't always agree, guys, I promise. But I do believe that it is a parent's responsibility because at the end of the day, those kids come home to you. And in my own world, Vincent, his speech is very limited, as I'm sure you guys have heard tonight on the radio. But he knows when to say thank you and please, and that is something he was taught. But then again, that just could be maybe the Southern in me. Who knows? Common Core is a joke. Ugh, I'm just going back to that. Oh my goodness, have you seen the things that they're doing with Common Core? The way they have them work out math problems is just absurd. It's just ass backwards is the way my mother used to tell me. It's just completely backwards and makes no sense. And then let's not even talk about the complete made-up history. But, that's most public school anyways. But
well, I'm not shocked by the history agenda, because as I've said, I've spent a lot of time trying to influence those who have a hold of mass media, and trying to get them to tell the truth as opposed to their sort of agenda-driven nonsense. Because I do know the effects that it has on the society, and how it does sort of warp the truth. The more you keep telling a lie, eventually it becomes the truth as far as the society is concerned. But I'm not surprised by that. From any of the what I call the public re-education camps, because it's always been part of the agenda. I mean, I've cited it before, again going back to my expertise. But here's the thing: it took me all the way until much later in school to see anything other than a couple of sentences in a history book regarding the assassination on John F. Kennedy, which generally would be something like, he was killed in Dallas, the date and possibly the street. That would be the end of that, and then maybe a brief mention of Oswald and him having been killed on television. That was about it. There's a whole lot more to that story than that. And, and of course, teaching us about the Federal Reserve, which they don't even bother to do anymore, and all of that. But the math problems, this was something that was really shocking to me, too, is that, I had my son bring me, because he had visited me over the weekend one time, some of his math homework. And I started to sort of instruct him about how to do it, and he was telling me that this was exactly the wrong thing to do. And he started trying to lay it out for me how it's supposed to be done, kind of, even though he was having trouble with it. And I said, honestly, what does it matter so long as you have a process and your answers are correct? Apparently, unless you do it exactly step by step the way they say, which is, again, I don't know how else to describe what he was showing me other than ass backwards works for me, Michelle. And you know what, folks? Here's another thing. I guarantee you at some point you're gonna hear more of our tempers, because we haven't really gotten any flared up. But it will happen, and I guarantee it's going to be most interesting when her and I disagree with one another. So
it's inevitable. It'll happen.
It's going to happen.
I'm still playing nice, but give it time.
Well, me too. This is what I do, and but believe me, if she winds up sticking me with something that I disagree with, you guys know I have no problem going into it with someone. But hopefully we'll be able to listen to one another and possibly learn something together, and maybe even teach you guys something as we go along. And just so everybody's aware, we are still on UCY.TV radio, unless we're off the air again. And we've got just about 29 minutes left according to my clock. All right? But I know this brings up a lot of issues for you because of your own personal situation, and like I said, I've got my own personal viewpoint about it. But we do agree that legislating morality is not necessarily the way to go here. But people need to educate themselves and to begin to think, in a greater sense about the world around them, I believe, and this is part of what the biggest problem is this disconnect, I would say, from your fellow man, from the consequences of your actions, and all these kind of things that are not being impressed upon the youth, which makes me worry quite a bit. So,
getting back to where we were at, again with I think it's like a school and home disconnect. I was speaking with some friends of mine today, actually, autism moms, because I have two groups of friends. I have typical moms, and then I have the autism moms, and the autism moms are the ones that cuss a lot more and usually drink more wine, but where they're talking about homeschooling their children. And the more we talked about it, they were talking about unschooling. And for those of you that don't know what unschooling is, it's where you kind of just go along in life and you teach your child these necessary things they need to know, but in real-world scenarios. You're going to learn math at the grocery store. You're not going to learn it sitting at the table writing out your process for figuring out what 2 + 2 is, which would probably get you the wrong answer anyways. And it's an interesting concept, and I think it would be beneficial for a lot of individuals and a lot of children in this world, and because here we are, I just graduated a decade ago, if y'all want to feel young, but just looking at what I learned then and what happened when I was out in the real world, quote unquote, I didn't learn a lot that I really needed to know. And I certainly didn't know anything about being awake. That's a whole other story. But we don't learn how to handle money. We don't learn about any of it. And here we are sticking our kids in school 8 hours a day learning about fake history that's not even true. And I'm not really sure where I was going with this statement.
But you know what? It's okay, because it's again, part of the context of what's gone on. And here's what I think is really great about the combination of what we're doing together here is that we have a slightly different generational perspective. Okay, and I've said this many times, and I'm sure that even though you were born in a slightly different era from me. Because look, when I was born, the Vietnam War was still going on. When I learned to read, I was still reading newspaper articles regarding the Watergate scandal. This was a different time period entirely, I think. But what is very, very visible to anyone who has, half a brain, I'm sorry again with this term, but if you're not retarded, you may recognize the fact that we have had a serious decline in the society, and it is partially due to this sort of re-education or uneducation that's gone on, but it is also because of the violation of what used to be what I would call the old world sort of, let's just call it the social contract between human beings. And it didn't really matter what your socioeconomic standing was. There was sort of an understanding that, you gave respect to elders who were worthy of respect, but half the time the elders are no longer worthy of respect. The authority figures are no longer worthy of respect. And it doesn't really matter anyway, because these kids growing up are not taught to respect anyone, not even themselves. So, it's just one of these things that has progressively gotten worse, I would say, from the time I was born in the 70s. From that time till now, I have seen nothing but the disintegration of that sort of social contract. And I'm sure that you've seen it too, maybe from a slightly different standpoint, but every time I've had somebody on who has been older than myself, they tell me that I'm not mistaken, that from that time period or slightly before the time period when I was born, the real sort of fabric of society, and I hate to use these sort of right-wing sounding terms, but the fabric of society has sort of been shredded, rather incrementally, but nonetheless shredded. So, this is instructive, I believe, as well, and I think it's good to get it from more than one perspective, and I'm always happy to hear that I'm not entirely crazy, although I do often like to say that I want to issue one more apology to all those guys who were wearing tinfoil hats. The CIA was beaming things into your brains, and I'm very, very sorry for having sort of disregarded your warnings. However, that being said, I'm sure that you agree with me on this again, that there has been this sort of incremental breakdown. Part of it, again, is the outside stimulus, the society not taking care of itself, the education system not being taken care of properly. But all of these things really boil down to those of us who were supposed to be the custodians of these things not taking our responsibilities seriously. And I think that from the time that you are starting to raise your children, you have to take these things seriously if you care about the world in which they are going to live. And I think that is the most important thing to get across here.
You know, going on the tangent that I am a little bit younger and from a different generation, there's something that I've seen kind of floating around that I find interesting. I don't know how familiar you are with memes, and you know, it's just the silly stuff that people write on pictures and stuff like that. And there's a meme, it's called Old Economy Steven, and there's another one too that comes to mind, and it's the parents that just kind of look, you know, they're looking, I don't remember the name of it, but it's just, you know, looking at you kind of judgingly. So here's the thing is, I think the older generation is kind of forgetting that they left a pretty crappy generation for us to come into. Like, just to give you some examples of what I'm looking at right now, you know, when I was in college, my summer job paid the tuition. Yeah, tuition was $400. You know, he bought a house in his 20s with a 9-to-5 job that didn't require a bachelor's degree, and they say kids these days have it easy. You know, we're in a really crappy generation in what we're growing up in, and I see so many people, especially my peers, you know, they're living in their parents' basements. And they're moving back in with their parents. There's 30, 40-year-olds living with their parents because they can't find a job with their college degree. Now, don't get me wrong. There's some nutcakes out there, some fruitcakes, nutcases, whatever you want to use, that have a basket weaving degree or some crap like that. Oh, I'm a free spirit or whatever, you know.
Oh, be careful there, Michelle. You might offend some of our listeners.
Oh, whatever. Well, guess what? If you have a basket weaving degree, enjoy weaving your baskets and selling it at the farmer's market. You know, I'm all for doing what makes you happy. I really am. That's why I do what I do. But we're, you know, my generation kind of has it rough. We have a crappy economy, and things aren't what they used to be. You know, I see people paying $20,000, $30,000 a year to go to college, and it's just. And it's not all y'all's fault, of course. And I hate to say y'all, and I hate to include you in that, Chuck. But
okay.
But it's definitely left us in a situation, and I guess it does connect to how we are these days. But we're also a very entitled generation as well. We expect everything right now. We want instant gratification. Man, my generation sucks. Now that I'm thinking about it, geez. You know, it's a generation of Keurigs and microwaves and...
Well, you know, they called us Generation X, you know, when I was growing up. So, you know, and I really thought that was kind of appropriate at the time because the X, of course, you know, I don't know how Common Core handles it, but X was an unknown quantity. We really did not know what direction we were going in, but here's the thing: there has been no leadership because there was no awakening from this stuff. I mean, look, all you have to do to figure out exactly how badly stacked against everyone the economic situation is this. In order to have a minimum wage job in 1968 paid, I don't know, about $2 an hour, something like that, okay? But in order to have the equivalent, you know, relatively speaking, in the current economic environment, for a minimum wage worker to make the same type of money that they made in 1968, and that's relatively speaking to the, you know, cost of inflation, et cetera, you would have to pay a minimum wage worker about $22 or $23 an hour. Okay? Now, no one making minimum wage makes $22 or $23 an hour. No one in any of those types of jobs will approach that, not even in a lifetime of work, generally speaking. This is a different world than it was then. That's for sure. And even like you were saying in the 90s and all that, when I was coming of age, look, all I had to do was earn a few $100s and I could take care of every single thing that I had to. There wasn't, you know, the wages of credit. There wasn't these exorbitant energy prices. There wasn't, I mean, gasoline was not even a huge issue. I remember people screaming in the state of New Jersey when gasoline broke $1 per gallon. Okay? Now that sounds laughable to you, doesn't it?
I remember, I don't remember. I remember when it was $1.50.
Well, I'll tell you this. I was working in the fuel industry at the time that it broke and remained over $1.20, and I was actually involved with the Lundberg surveys and all that other good stuff, trying to keep track of what the average gas prices were on a daily basis, stuff like this. I was also aware of what it cost, the amount of taxes, and everything else. Like in the state of New Jersey, it was 32.9 cents per gallon were the combined amounts of taxes on every gallon of gasoline, which is why, by the way, one of those taxes is federal, which is why you see the 9/10 of a penny on every gas sign pretty much across the country, except in places where state taxes have actually caused the fraction to be different. But when you see it at 9/10 of a penny, that actually represents the passing on of a tax to you. And 32.9 cents is actually not bad. The state of New Jersey is not among the highest gasoline prices, in the country. It hasn't been. It never was. We had refineries right there and access to certain things that caused the price to be less based on transportation and things like that on a retail level. But people don't understand this stuff. And what I don't understand is how everyone very calmly accepted the doubling and tripling of that price over the course of about 15 years in this country, the increase of the food prices to a ridiculous level without even batting an eyelash. And meanwhile, it makes you wonder, the people that are confused that we're in these very tough economic times, and I'm still asking because I know this is brought up a lot. We're supposed to be in an economic recovery here. I want to know where it is because I don't see it. And I've been in a few different states in this country recently, and I see no evidence of this so-called economic recovery yet. But, again, for more of that kind of news, I'll tell you what, tomorrow night you check out Boiler Room Radio, and Jim Funky will definitely handle that with Lance. They always handle the stock market, which, is a predetermining factor to this stuff. And, I hope everybody also checks that out as well. There's plenty of guys talking about this stuff and explaining it. But on a real sort of, street level, I don't understand why more people other than myself and the few friends I have, aren't more upset about this, aren't more bothered by the fact that the corporations have systematically sort of wrung any chance of advancement for individuals in this economic sphere out of the entire population. But, again, that's one of my little rants. Yeah, but it has changed over the generations. And I think it's just really instructive, again, to come out of the, like I said, the era of the 70s, where, like I said, when I was learning to read, I was still reading about the after effects of the Watergate scandal and the joke of the Ford administration. That's how I learned to read, is those newspapers when I was about 3 years old. This is the kind of stuff that but if you think about the difference between then and now, even the sort of level of apathy in the general population, there was more of a willingness to become involved. Yes, it was among young people. Yes, it was motivated by the Vietnam War and social injustice. But you know what? Right now, as we speak, we have been in Afghanistan for more than 13 years. We are still in a system where there is economic and social injustice, and I do not see the outrage. I see nothing but apathy and sleepwalkers staring down at their fondle slab of choice. So, I wonder why we are here, and I wonder why there aren't more people becoming aware.
Fear. That's what it all is. That's what it was with me. Like I talk about all the time, Vincent was really, Vincent, my son, for those, not Vincent Avesley. Vincent is the reason I woke up, and it was a domino effect. Just everything kind of just fell into place. At first it was like pharma, and then it just grew, and it grew, and it grew, and it grew, and it grew, and here we are, reading 9/11 conspiracies. But that's another show for another day. But, you're right, and I think it's all fear, and especially my generation. That's what we've been taught. What we remember is, I think, the first real event in politics I remember is President Clinton getting a BJ. I mean, you have the Watergate scandal, and I have President Clinton banging his intern. So I think that really set the tone for my entire generation too. And then we also have we saw 9/11 from the child standpoint, and we saw the fear of it, and we didn't know any better. I was in high school when 9/11 happened, to age myself a little more, but everyone was scared, and we were taught that. So we were taught that, it's normal to go and take your shoes off and to get fondled at the airport. And this is just what we've always known. We don't know any different. And slowly people are starting to wake up. And it takes things that are relative to them. And just like me, it took something that was important to me just yesterday on my Facebook. Again, I'm not a big Facebook person at all, actually. In fact, I hate Facebook. Most of the things I do are in secret groups. The only reason I'm becoming a little bit active is because of you putting up with me and making me talk to these guys and having them listen to me. But I posted
wait a minute. I'm making you do this?
No, you're not making me. I'm actually very honored that you're putting up with me. But I reposted something about tampons. And it was, I know, not your thing. I'm sorry, guys. But it was about GMOs and about Monsanto using non-organic cotton and essentially pesticides leach it into the lady bits, and how much it, and how it can affect us. And then there's someone that thinks that I'm crazy. She thinks that I'm just, tinfoil hat wearing lady. And keep in mind, she's also got an environmentally caused autistic child. She doesn't acknowledge it, but she does. And she goes, "Wow, Michelle, most of the things you say are crazy, but I can't believe this is happening." Really? Tampons are what it's going to take to wake you up, lady?
Well, look, they gotta get these GMOs into your body some way or other, and if you won't voluntarily eat them, well, we got another way. But it is weird sometimes to watch what it is that actually eventually smacks somebody in the face. Yeah, tampons. Okay, look, if it works for you, great. If that's what it took, then please join us and try to change this tide of insanity. And here's the construct that I think is really, really important, because you think that your generation has an exclusive on fear. It doesn't. Here's the deal. Before mine. Oh no, go ahead. What?
We're all fear. You guys too. You had Vietnam. You had Korea. Y'all are fearful. We've all been fearful.
Well, see, that was part of what I was going to bring up. Is that, look, before me there was the fear of the atomic war. There was the fear of the Russians, communism. Okay, all of that stuff going back to the red baiting, the Red Scare, and nuclear winter. Which, you know what? Nuclear war is a legitimate fear. Some of these things have legitimate basis to begin with, but they're sort of seized upon again by the media, by those who seek to control the rest of us for a purpose. They had the duck and covers. They had the build a bomb shelter in your backyard because the Russians are coming. The Russians are coming. Okay, around the time you were born, the first time Red Dawn was released. Okay, this was an actual believable thing. If you want to look back at something again during that time period, just do a little research if you want. There was a movie called The Day After, which caused a serious sort of resonance in the population, because we had been fed this fear about the Soviets and nuclear war and the invasions and et cetera, et cetera. There was the Vietnam guilt era, which, we realized exactly how damaged, because I say again, there were only 58,000 killed in Vietnam of our people, but there were more than 1 million men who returned back to this nation who were damaged in one way or another. Okay, and I'm lumping together the psychological damage. I'm lumping together with the utmost respect the individuals who gave their limbs, who gave their blood, who gave their sweat, and who gave their souls. Okay, I'm putting them all together. There was a minimum of at least 1 million individuals, delivered back to America in bad shape from that adventure, which accomplished nothing except to proliferate, of course, all of the drugs out of the Golden Triangle and all that kind of good stuff, topic for another day. But, we also forget the 1 million Vietnamese on a conservative estimate, and my historical research shows me that it could have been up to 4 million Vietnamese who were slaughtered during that time period. These are not all enemy insurgents. These are not all soldiers. A lot of them were civilians, and this is the way of things. Not to mention the introduction of all the defoliants, the Agent Orange, which, now you can see still resonating in something called Roundup. Good luck. Take a look at that if you want to. All of this stuff, the revving up of the Cold War, the introduction of terrorism in the 70s and the 80s as this amorphous boogeyman, then culminating on 9/11. From the time my father died, which, by the way, my father died on September 11th, 1976. Exactly 25 years later, I was confronted with that whole thing, and I got to be honest with you, I was absolutely suckered into the fear-based trauma programming that was out there. And I feel badly about that to this day. But all of these things aside, I think that this is why I like to say this as well, and I have taken it from someone else, but I think it's a valid thing to steal, is that if we begin to stop embracing fear is the most unproductive of the only two emotions that there are on the planet as far as I'm concerned. There is fear, there is love. If you act out of love, good things will come of it. If you act out of fear, there is nothing but destruction. And that is all there is to it. Whether you're utilizing it to control others or you're allowing it to control you, fear is one of those things that we must do our level best to abandon as people. And that is just my rant again. Sorry, I know we're down to the last 5 minutes here, Michelle, and I'm going to give them to you as much as I can control my mouth.
No, I love your input, and you definitely make me look at things from another aspect, and I do the same with you, and I think we have a very interesting dynamic, and that, we do have this, age difference, and of course, you're a man, I'm a woman, and we were raised in different times, and and speaking to you, and what the other guys are saying as well, fear is not necessarily just something in my generation, and I certainly can't speak on a whole for my generation, but as a whole, we've always been manipulated by fear. It's how we're controlled.
Absolutely. And that is the thing to remember, is that, the moment that you're beginning to fear something is the moment that you're allowing control of yourself to be handed over to something other than yourself. Couple of quick reminders, by the way, because I know we've gotten really engrossed in our conversation. We had our technical problems and everything else. But after my show tonight, of course, at 8 o'clock will be What Matters Worldwide with Vince. And then after Vince, at 10, we'll be Double Crossed with Drew and Chuck. Well, Double Crossed Radio, I know that they got some interesting stuff to say, and Vince always has some interesting people on, and I advise everybody to stay tuned for that as well on UCY.TV radio. And again, I think, well, you know what, I misread my clock. I think now we're down to about the last 4 minutes. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to get out there, Michelle, but go right ahead. I don't know, Facebook, or if you want to suggest any other websites or anything else for tonight. But I think we did pretty good tonight, actually.
I think we did. We didn't do too bad winging it here. We're still open on what we're going to call my segment, I suppose. So please give us any suggestions that you might have. We have a few working names. Anything you'd like to hear us yak about. Again, tonight was definitely random and all over the spectrum. But I think, everything is related. And all of this really comes back to why we are raising our kids the way we are. And it even boils down to the fear that we were just discussing. So, any suggestions, throw my way. I'm not promising I'm going to listen to them, but I'll definitely entertain it. Like my Facebook. Well, you have to be my friend. I'm not quite popular enough to have a like. But go over to my Facebook page, Michelle Mashuli, CIULLI. Go and talk in our chat room. I'm in there. I kind of pay attention to you guys, and we definitely suggest you guys call in because we love to get some input from y'all. And when's the next time we're going to be yakking together?
Well, if you want to, we can do this again on Tuesday. I know I said I want to make sure you're on Thursdays, but if you want to do Tuesday and Thursday, that would be great. I also do Saturday nights, but Saturday I'm going to try and get back to doing the interviews that everybody seemed to like a little bit. And, of course, one of my little motives for adding you on is that I got to have somebody on the show who's a little more likable than myself, so... Well,
I think I'm just manipulating my womanly ways, and that's okay. I definitely have a face for radio, so we'll work that as much as we can.
Oh, now I got to call. You're going to make me call BS on you on the last couple of minutes here. That's not right. That's not right at all. Everybody, stay tuned for Vince Easley on UCY.TV radio. Bye-bye.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was
but I have the files. I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things.
I said to myself,
how can that be possible? The brain, pistols and frontal slab of choice. I don't know when that was. It doesn't really matter. Internet, professional wrestlers, and not Jesse Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the information comes from as long as it's real. It doesn't take hard to get real information. Because seriously, they don't want you to have just read